This is Andy Gutierrez from StarWars.com, and you are listening to Coffee with Kenobi with Dan Z. This is the podcast you're looking for.
This is James Arnold Taylor, and you're listening to Coffee with Kenobi. I have a good feeling about this.
Joining us today for a cup of coffee to talk about the 18th episode in Season 3 of The Mandalorian. The episode is titled The Mines of Mandalore. Are two of our great friends. First, you may have heard of this individual before. He is the co-creator, the award-winning designer, and I had another name I was going to say for you. I can't remember what it was.
Class Clown?
Class Clown, Cory Clubb.
Yes, hello. We're back again this week. I'm excited to talk more Mandalorian. Yes,
indeed. See, I resist saying this is the way because I just, we'll find other things to say. Speaking of other things to say, our other great friend who is joining us now, this is her first time. She's been on Coffee with Kenobi several times, talking about Willow, and sometimes helping walk me through that entire process. This is Jen Sopchockchai. She is here for the first Star Wars appearance for Coffee with Kenobi. Jen, welcome back to the show.
Thank you, Dan. I'm so glad to be back. And yes, talking with you about Willow was great fun, but Star Wars is something special, very special to me. So I'm really happy to be here for this.
Yes, that is the bread and butter of the show. Well, do you put butter on coffee? Is that a British thing? Probably not. I know that tea and milk. That's dairy.
I think if you're on a keto diet, there's something called like a bullet coffee that has Irish butter in it.
That's what I was thinking.
I was like crumpets or something.
I think that's a separate food group. Anyway,
okay. Well,
let's talk about the Mines of Mandalore. So we'll just kind of run through it as we always do. One word to describe the episode and overall thoughts on the episode. And Jen, let's start with you.
Sure. So my one word, though I was very tempted to say spelunking, just because it's a very fun word.
Fun.
And it is uttered in this episode. I went with diaspora because to me, this episode was all about Mandalorians spread throughout the galaxy and what it really means to be a Mandalorian and how Mandalorian culture has sort of morphed and changed depending on your relationship to it. We see through these three characters who identify as Mandalorians.
I love that. And you can hear people pulling over and on the side of the road and Googling diaspora, which is fun. Which is basically like you're dispersing throughout, in this sense, it's throughout the galaxy, obviously. That's great. Love it. Cory, what about you?
Yeah, my myth, my one word. You had a good word. That was better than my word. I'm a underling. I don't know. I don't think that broadly. Mine was mythos. Just because this is jam packed with just kind of digging into the mythos of the Mandalorian culture.
I see what you did
people.
there.
Yeah, you like that? And of course, the big ending reveal. So I think this episode overall was another slam dunk. I think it was, again, they're diving deeper into the Mandalorian background and showing us a lot of gorgeous details around what it has come to be. And it's been, I kind of realized in this episode, I was like, man, Mandalorians just went from, a small bounty hunter in Return of the Jedi to this huge, sprawling landscape of people group in Star Wars. So it's really, really very large. And I think it's really cool. They're bringing a lot more context to the future.
I like that very much. Fascinating. Yeah, it's pretty amazing how he went from a mail-away figure known as the Super Stormtrooper, in that armor. And of course, Dave Filoni is such a massive fan of Mandalorian and Mandalorian culture, the armor. And here we are. My word is, I'm going to hyphenate. I feel like I can do that. That's jaw-dropping. It's jaw-dropping. There are a number of things to really kind of take your breath away in this. First words, we'll put that in air quotes. Shocking twists, some new ideas, I guess, about how things are working in Star Wars that I'm really looking forward to getting into. And of course, that ending, I'm really looking forward to breaking down. Just a few moments that really, really kind of shook things. Cory, to me, like, let's start off with Tatooine first. I mean, not just
Yeah.
Cory, but you too, Jen, of course. Let's talk about just the sequence, because I see this. I'm going to break it down into, we've got the Tatooine opening, we've got the Mandalorian Grogu's arrival on Mandalore itself until he gets captured, and then we've got Grogu going back and getting Bo-Katan and her rescuing Mando, and then that last sequence is Bo-Katan, Grogu, and the Mandalorian together going into the waters for a mighty change. Let's just start with Tatooine. Cory, Peli Motto is someone that I don't think I ever noticed that when she smiles, she's missing a tooth. Is that new?
That's from Book of Boba Fett.
Oh yeah.
It was
it
was kind of like an outtake, or not an outtake, but like a ad lib that she put in, I think.
But was it not missing the first time she appeared?
I don't think so. I don't remember.
I don't know.
I'm tempted to open up season 1 and just watch any of the minis. I don't know. That's a good question.
That would be great if we got at some point in some form either a comic or sort of a one-off short or something like that on Disney Plus of like the story of how she lost her tooth.
That would be great.
I want to see that.
And do other Mandalorian tooth fairies, and would they visit Peli Motto?
Hide underneath your helmet? Yes.
What do you think of the opening sequence with Tatooine? I really like Peli Motto working with the Jawas. Kind of dishonest, but also very entertaining.
She's definitely become one of those characters. They're like, I kind of relate her to like a Cosmo Kramer style character that's kind of wild and crazy, but wheeling and dealing. She's one of those characters that doesn't sit in the background and just like kind of flutter around. She does her thing, and we're getting to know her. She treats the ones she loves the best, but also people that she's just trying to get by and kind of make her existence kind of known. So I love the fact that she deals with Jawas all the time. I guess their language down. I think it's a fun little thing to do.
Jawa'ese. I don't ever remember being said. I saw that on the closed captions. Yeah.
Is that when it comes out? Okay.
Yeah.
It's, and the other thing I want to say, we're back to Tatooine again. I feel like for Tatooine being such like a kind of a desolate planet, we go there a lot. I feel like in Star Wars, planets visiting. So I'm not mad about it. It was kind of cool to see some callbacks to Episode 1. The little small pod race or speed race looks like. Was pretty cool, and Boonta Eve was definitely a callback to Anakin. So pretty cool.
I will never get tired of Tatooine. In fact, I wish Galaxy's Edge was Tatooine instead of Batuu. And I think you could make a couple of adjustments and that could happen. Jen, what are some fun things or things that jump out to you? I know you're excited. There's a lot to break down in this, and probably not as much in Tatooine per se, but there's some stuff.
I love the Tatooine scene. I mean, in general, it was delightful and fun. It was great to see Peli Motto again. But to me, this was a great fake out in terms of our expectations from last week, because I think the end of last week when it's like, oh, we're going to go somewhere to get a part. That to me was like, oh, we're going to have a sort of side quest to go get this part before we can kind of get back on track in terms of heading towards Mandalore. And I personally love those one-off episodes. I love the adventure of the week structure to this and the Bad Batch and other Star Wars stories. But I was sort of bracing myself for the discourse, the filler discourse of people being like, really, we got to go off and go here. Like, why can't we just get to the real story? And so I was so tickled by the idea that I feel like this is Jon Favreau sort of like punking the audience and saying like, you thought this is going to take a really long time, but boom, we're giving you exactly what you want in this episode. And we're and Peli Motto is what makes that happen, right? Because she sort of redirects Din's, I got to get this part for IG-11. IG-11 is my focus, and redirects him to be like, no, you can just go now. It's fine. Bye. I can't hear you. Bye.
Her manipulating that Rodian and realizing that she's working with the Jawas, I feel like that would have a short shelf life, but I don't know. They're pretty clever. And the whole R5, selling R5, getting actual real confirmation this is in fact R5D4. I mean, it was pretty understood, but having it like that, he's fresh from fighting for the rebellion. I love that. I was a little frustrated with the whole, she hits him in the the part falls off, the slapstick idea. I'm like, is he really going to go for this? This seems like a far cry from IG-11. He says he needs a droid that's rated for spelunking so he can test the atmosphere. And then at the end, he's, like you said, she closes the cockpit on him. I want to talk about what you just mentioned. I really like that. I see the title of the episode, and I said to Mason, already? We're really going there? I thought it would be like episodes 7 and 8 of the season, or 6, 7, and 8. But we're already there, and we've already forgotten about the MacGuffin that is the IG-11, circuitry, his memory circuit that we need. And we're just off to the races. I really like that. And I do think it's not really, the bait and switch is a good description. But here's the thing. She swears that Grogu had his first word, that he said Peli. Now, I don't know about the two of you, but we rewound that part. Yeah, the caption says that. I rewound that probably 5 or 6 times. This reminds me of when Mason was little, and I was like, he said dad. And like, no, he just said blah, 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 blah. Yeah. It's like wishful thinking. What do you two think?
No, my kids were totally on track. Oh, he said something. We were all kind of arguing about it. Like, I don't think it's just gobbledygook. I think it's just maybe talk or Grogu talk, if you will. We did rewind another part in that section where Pella, she says Boba Fett. Is it like a Boston accent or something? Like, I feel like
she does say it weird, but at the D23 Expo, she said, I have no idea what I'm saying. Dave writes these words, and John, I have no idea what they mean. So to me, that was like perfect.
Okay. Very good.
It was very convincing.
Yes. Jen, are you in agreement? This wasn't his first word.
Yeah, I feel like this does introduce the idea that at some point down the road, right, that we're sort of his development is on, and a lot of what we've seen from Grogu this season so far has been establishing that he has developed, right, mostly with his use of the Force. We see him jumping around everywhere and everything, but I think that they really want us to remember that he went through some amount of Jedi training to make everything believable. But I think that I think they're teasing that, he may not be actually saying words yet, but he is moving in that direction. And so I think it's setting up for something, his uttering his first word later. It might be much, much later. But yeah, I think I was like you, Dan. I was like, as a parent, this really resonated with me because, you're especially with your first child, I feel like you're like really in anticipation of like, are they on track? Are they okay? Like, should they be talking already? And you really want to kind of hear what you want to hear. My daughter called everyone cat. That was her. Like, she pointed at people and just said cat, cat, cat. And it was like,
yeah.
Oh, why is it mama?
That's perfect. That's exactly right. So he leaves the island. There's this, not the island. They leave Tatooine. And I think there's a beautiful moment where the Mandalorian talks to Grogu and says, this was once a green and beautiful planet, but now it's scary. Grogu is scared. We've already established that Grogu is very strong with the Force. He's able to at least recognize when Purgils are flying in hyperspace. We've seen a lot of examples and evidence. And like you just said, Jen, he's not talking necessarily in words that are basic, the basic language, but he can navigate. He can function with the Force. He's acrobatic. He, I mean, he's highly, his emotional intelligence is extraordinarily high.
Apparently he's good at using maps.
So yes, exactly. And she said, well, you must be strong with the Force because you found me by yourself. But I don't remember ever hearing that the Mandalorian grew up on Concordia, which of course fans of the Clone Wars know, and Rebels know what that planet is. Bo-Katan lives on Kalevala. And then they land, and then things take a couple of interesting turns. Is there any symbolism we can take from the surface of Mandalore?
Turning the glass, you mean?
It's like a glassy. I expected him to slip when he walked on it, and everyone has always said this planet it's destroyed, it's ruined, it's cursed. We've heard all kinds of things. It's a sheet of glass, as Boba Fett says in the end of season 2.
I always kind of, glass is reflective, right? So if it's reflecting up, We'll say it that way, right?
Mhm.
It's reflecting the stars, right? So I'd expect that that's a metaphor of the Mandalorian culture or people being scattered like stars. So they're out there kind of trying to figure out what's going on. There's different clans, different cultures, different ways of life. So they don't know what to do necessarily. Who's the leader? Who's really believing in what? Do we believe all the same things? The water baptisms, to leave the helmet on, take it off? Do we rule by the Darksaber? So I think that, that's maybe something you could kind of tease in there or tweak in there about the glass, surface. But I mean, that's maybe a stretch, but I think there's so much more going on underneath the glass that's going to hopefully rise up. And
I think you just hit the metaphor on the head. Jen, what do you think?
Yeah, I was going to say something simpler. Glass is very fragile, breakable, easy to shatter. That's sort of the state of Mandalore as a culture right now. As we're going towards this, that like it's it's very it has cracks in it, and they're broken into pieces, and it's it's really hanging on by a thread in terms of like, can we call this a culture even if everyone's kind of spread out everywhere? And to me, the part of this episode that was Grogu, Bo-Katan, and Din, to me, really illustrated that really well, because if you think about it, there are three different versions of Mandalorians in terms of like their relationship to the homeworld, right? Like for me, one of the best lines in this episode was Din saying, "This is the homeworld of our people. Every Mandalorian can trace their roots back here. And you know what? I haven't been here either." Right. So like the idea that he identifies so strongly with Mandalorian culture, but he's never actually been to Mandalore. And then Grogu is even one step removed from that, because he's never, because at least Din says that he grew up on Concordia, but Grogu is like completely new and learning all of this for the first time, has no kind of rooting in traditional Mandalorian culture. He's learning that from Din. Whereas on the other end of the spectrum, you have Bo-Katan, who is like, you don't even know what, you've never had Pog soup. Like, this is crazy, because to me, as a child, every Mandalorian kid growing up had Pog soup. And so it's really interesting that there are certain touchstones where it's like they're diverging culturally, but then also when it comes to the creed, that's the one thing that seems to kind of be the unifying thing that kind of gets Bo-Katan sort of reignites her kind of like erodes away at her cynicism about Mandalore, and kind of like catches her attention in a big way.
I like that. I like that this whole series is about identity, as any good story is. And the Mandalorians, their identity is very fragile. It's glass in, if we want to compare it to the surface, it were fusion bombs from the Purge, or what we find out they have disrupted the magnetic field around the planet's core. So they can't communicate with anybody off planet. They're completely cut off from the rest of the galaxy. And when he said that, I'm like, hello, metaphor. That's exactly right. And that's what the Mandalorian people have done. And Bo-Katan says that later in the episode. What made me sad, or does she say sad? I wrote it down. She said what scares her was how they decided to fight with each other. She said it pains her to see our kind wipe one another out.
Yeah.
And you get this idea that while the Empire is, of course, the face of the destruction, you can't watch a Mandalorian fight, any Mandalorian fight, and not say, how did they ever get defeated in combat? But history is full of things like this, right? The pride, the envy, the lust for power, all of those things end up fighting them back. And I didn't really look at Mandalore as glass. I always look at it as ice, because even though it's not ice, like I said, I expected him to slip. I thought when the starfighter landed, I thought it was going to be like slip, but it didn't. There's just so much there. And like you said, Cory, underneath the surface of what's actually going on, once he starts to explore, once he realizes that it's safe, he pressurizes. What does he say? Pressurizes his helmet.
Mm-hmm.
Then this really odd-looking creature that kind of reminds me. There's an old TV show called Land of the Lost with dinosaur people. Yeah, it very much reminded me of that. We find out later that these things are called alamites. But my favorite sequence here is when he pulls out the Darksaber finally. If you listened to the show last week or watched on YouTube or Facebook Live, then I had the good fortune to talk to Dave Filoni and Jon Favreau, and I asked them specifically about the symbolism of the Darksaber. And you heard Jon Favreau and Dave talk about it, but it's shown here. The Mandalorian, it's like a heavy responsibility for whatever reason. When he turns this thing on, he can barely lift it above his knees. Now we know that he has nothing involving the Force. Dave Filoni says that to us. But tell me what you got out of that. Jen, let's go Jen first and then Cory.
For me, it was really the contrast between seeing how Din is still struggling with the weight of the Darksaber versus Bo-Katan, because when she picks that up off the ground, it's like nothing.
Jedi. She's a Jedi.
She's just going. Yeah. And it was great to see. And so that's really interesting and made me sort of think, are we setting this up so that she will teach him how to wield the Darksaber? And obviously there's some tension there too, because she probably secretly wants the Darksaber for herself. The extent to which she will go through to accomplish that is debatable at this point. But
really? See, I think she's had plenty of chances to take it or to fight him, but I just don't think that's who she is, even though she wants us to think that.
So you're in complete, like you think she's very trustworthy. She's not. Doesn't have an ulterior motive.
I think she's had plenty of opportunities to take it. Din Djarin is being parasited, right? He's having blood drain completely. I mean, he's dying. He's going to die. She has all the chance in the world. She doesn't do it. I think that would have been her opportunity. But
she wants to win it the right way, though, right?
Yeah.
Well, that is true.
So that might be why she's waiting. She's waiting for the right moment.
But she could have fought him at her castle,
at her house,
in Kalevala. Like, people keep asking me, does she just sit on that throne all the time?
Yeah.
I don't know.
There was a shot where they lingered on her putting a blade in her boot, and that made me suspicious. I was like, "Oh, is this going to be a thing later?"
So you got one eye on her still.
I don't want to, but basically, when I watched the episode last week, I was totally like, "Oh, like I feel so bad for her." She's really distraught over what's happened. She feels like she's failed again. And then I listened to Rebel Base Card podcast, and Greg Cass was like, "Don't trust her for a second," and it made a really compelling argument for why this is performative. And she just kind of like I think he said she was like a lioness, sort of like playing with her prey. And so then I was like, "Oh, I can't unsee that."
Well, she saves his life twice in the episode.
Yeah.
If she is like that, then she's a sociopath.
I don't want her to be a sociopath.
I don't think she is. I think there's honor there still. I mean, you got to remember in Rebels and stuff like that there's a lot of integrity. She's got a very gruff exterior, and she's by no means fuzzy, and like a little teddy bear. She will cut you if she needs to. But I think she admires the heck out of Din, and she could have fought him in her castle. She could have fought him on the Star Cruiser in season 2. I don't know, but I mean, I love when Greg talks, so I could easily subscribe to that too.
I think going back to Darksaber, it's an object, right? It's an object that's in this world.
It's a symbol
that you can see. Yeah, it's a symbol in some respects to what her kind of belief is, and this whole episode is really about Bo-Katan and her belief, I think, and she wants that Darksaber so darn bad, and you see her wield it with ease because she has a goal in mind. She knows it's not just made to just be used utilitarian, as a weapon. She has faith in it, right? But then we see that shift a little bit towards the end of the episode. Obviously, that mentality of her, oh crap, everything I believed would save me is now spun on his head because it's true. All the myths or whatnot are true from her perspective. So she has to I think she's going to have to battle herself in the sense of trying to come to terms of what do I believe now? And I'm probably getting ahead of myself, but is the Darksaber really now the end that she needs to have, or is there something else? There's something bigger and better now. So I think she is a lioness. I like that type of corporation,
Yeah.
but also she's also part of a pride. If you're going to take on that lion's term, she's doing the best she can for the pride, and if that means taking someone else down with her, or taking someone out that she might feel she needs to, then she's willing to do that. So I don't think that necessarily they're at odds yet. They're still kind of working together to figure this out. And she has this big revelation in this episode. And so what she does next is going to be really telling of who she really is in her character. So, yeah, the Darksaber, I think, is definitely an interesting piece to the puzzle.
I'm going to have to go a long way to think she's going to turn. If Fennec Shand didn't in the Book of Boba Fett, I don't know. I just don't. I think when she tells us in the Apostate that she says, "Well, you've got the Darksaber, wave it around, they'll follow you." I think she's starting to see the folly. I think everything that she's learned in this episode and the way that she's reflective, I think we're going to see. I think coming out of that water at the end, I think Mandalorian's not the only one who's gone through some sort of a change. I hope so anyway, because I really want to like Bo-Katan more than I do, and I think this would help.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think, and all of her lines in this episode, if you know her backstory from the Clone Wars, carries so much weight, right? Because it's when she says it, fighting amongst ourselves made us weak, right? She's speaking from experience because she was a part of it. She was contributing to the fracturing of Mandalorian society in the Clone Wars. And so the idea that she has sort of gained wisdom from her experience when she's saying this, and that she has this outer perspective. Yeah, that's why I think she's going to end up being an ally in the end, at least. And I do think that moment when she's talking about her father, which we actually don't really know a lot about, like the story, his backstory is not in the Clone Wars series. They never talk about it, I think. And so it's for when she starts talking about him, and this is actually, I'm going to confess, the moment I choked up during this episode, I started tearing up unexpectedly. It really took me by surprise when she's saying he was a great man, and then Din stops and looks at her and says, "This is the way." To me, that was such a powerful moment. And Katie Sackhoff does an amazing job reacting, because to her, she's suddenly feeling the power that she hasn't felt in a really long time, of like, oh wow, this is our ways are meaningful. Like, our culture means something, and we need to preserve it. So I thought that was really great.
This is Vanessa Marshall, and you're listening to Coffee with Kenobi.
You make a good point there, Jen. And whenever someone in movies or TV shows will say, "Oh, I lost that person," or "that person died," they always say, "Oh, I'm sorry for your loss," or "I'm sorry." That's what you say. But almost like, to your point, Din goes to a higher level above that and says, "This is the way." Like, I feel for you. I'm trying to build in a little bit of understanding. Like, don't push me so far away. I'm trying to understand you a little more. And so you're definitely right on with that. I think that's a great piece of thought there.
And just to do the Darksaber thing a little bit more, when she has it and she's using it, I know we're out of context a little bit. She does. I never see, and I looked. I watched it a couple times now. I looked at her looking at it, and she just gives it to him. Like, she doesn't there's no reluctance or a sigh. And I mean, she's obviously used it before because she uses it in Rebels, and until she loses it to Moff Gideon, for however that actually transpires. And I don't know. It's going to be really, really fun to see. Let's talk about the trap before Bo-Katan shows up. There is so there's one thing that's been kind of nagging at me, and I'm among friends. We're having coffee together.
Sure.
We got the 3 chairs at our table, and everyone.
It's just us.
Just us. Yeah, just us. And the volume does a lot. I'm sure it's
soundstage. You're speaking of the volume.
It's transcended filmmaking and movie making. Ewan McGregor said it. It was on the show. He said it's great. I could go and I can be on Tatooine, and I could go get in my car and drive home, because it's everything is there. But there are times, and I'm not saying it looks bad. It looks beautiful. It looks wonderful. It's absolutely it transports me to another place. But there are times when I feel the lack of depth. When I see the volume and they're going down into the city, and it's a great sequence, and I feel like the space and the volume, and I can in my brain is saying this is an effect. There really aren't a lot of sets here. It takes me out of it just a little bit, and I'm not happy about that, but I'm being honest.
Sure. I think that's fair. I think it's a really fair point, because I think special effects and some of these shows have to get done so quickly, and there's a little bit of not as polished as they would maybe like it to be, but yet it's good enough. And the volume definitely creates an atmosphere for the actors to portray without having to travel or be in areas that have to be set up forever, and they just type it in and it poof, it's on the screen.
Well, I do think it's polished. I don't want to say that. Not that you're
well,
saying
I mean,
that,
so you're
I
saying
think it's
the
very
depth of
polished. I can feel when I'm not on a set.
Yeah.
Well,
to me, there's sort of a flatness to it, a visual flatness, like a lack of depth that I agree that you can tell. You can tell the difference.
Was it the scene for you guys that when he was looking kind of over the crust of that edge where he looked down the city? Okay. So I think I thought for that same thing too. I was like, man, this feels like it's just like I can tell obviously there's nothing there. But when he did kind of like float down or like use his jetpack to jump down, I was like, oh, okay, they're actually showing us a little more interaction. I felt like that was a nice little, touch point rather than him just appearing at the bottom, I guess. So I felt like he was actually traveling down and going further down into the depths of the planet. So, yeah, I mean, it's interesting that you put that, because how else would you do that, that wreckage and all that stuff? I mean, that's
And I've never complained about special effects, and I'm not complaining about effects now, but I'm just saying there's a slight emotional disconnect for me as a viewer. It doesn't take away from the story, but I'm just aware of it.
Sure.
For me, the use of creatures really helped make up for that, though. I think that really rounded out the environment that we got here in a way that made it come alive. So I think if they hadn't have that, it had just been sort of desolate and empty on its own, then
I agree.
It would have been.
Totally. And the fact that it's not a CGI creature, or if it was, it's hard to tell, especially the Alamites. I like that. I don't know if Neil Scanlon worked on these. I'm assuming he did. He does all the creature effects. But really, really remarkable. When Din he picks up that Mandalorian armor, which looks very dead. I mean, it's just a piece of Beskar anyway. But when he picks it up and then you realize he's inside a trap.
Yeah.
This was deliciously creepy.
Deliciously creepy?
Yeah, it was a lot more horror leaning than I would have ever expected the show to be. It was, especially the droid with the eyeball.
Yeah.
That's unlike anything I've ever seen in Star Wars, I want to say, in terms of creepiness level.
It was like an evil vampiric version of Plankton from SpongeBob SquarePants.
That's good. We get these. We got this from the first episode too. These new creatures. They're mixing old with new. We have R5 in this episode being the old, and this creature being the new. I love this creature. I love this little. I wrote down it's like a crab creature, because it's not really a droid or a robot.
Yeah, I don't know what it is.
It's like a creature of some sort that has basically taken loose parts or things and made some kind of a body form. My kids are like, "Oh, it's General Grievous," or something like that. I was like, "It does. It reminds me a lot of that character." Piecing together.
That's where my mind went too. But my big question was, whose eye is that?
Yeah,
because to me it was like, is this a Mandalorian's eye that they sort of harvested and then reappropriated for this weird Franken droid? So I don't know. Yeah.
Well, my brain went to it's not canonically possible of when Darth Maul is found on that garbage planet.
My kids all said that too. They said that was kind of very reminiscent of that. Yeah.
It's
not unheard of in Star Wars, right? So it makes sense.
No, this thing has no use for weapons. It's casual. I mean, if it is a Mandalorian or has any sense of whatever, I mean, that's the Darksaber. Just tosses it aside, tosses the blaster aside. I don't know what the purpose of this thing is, unless it seems a little more sentient than just a wild beast. But all it appears to be doing is bleeding the Mandalorian, like a mosquito.
Yeah.
And then maybe that's how it feeds, but how has it survived all this time? Yeah. I guess it doesn't really matter. What does matter is Grogu gets a significant amount of solo screen time. So Jen, take it away. A lot going on with Grogu as he recruits Bo-Katan, and they're one-on-ones. I guess they're one-on-ones, even though Grogu doesn't say much. Sorry, Pelly. Are really fascinating.
Yeah, no, this was great. I actually really love that he had that he can operate his own pod now and move around freely. I think that's a really clever. That's a very clever solve for he's tiny, and we saw that in Book of Boba Fett with Luke using the Force to try to help him move faster. So I was like, how are we going to do this long term? Like we can't, And so I thought that was really nice, and I liked him zooming around in his little pod. I thought that was great, and the moment when he knocks out that Alamite, I love the expression on his face because it's like a mixture of like he's really pleased with himself, but also really surprised. He's like, "Oh, that worked," in a way that I thought was great. So yeah, I just love seeing him being really capable here and not being sort of the helpless. Oh, action's happening now, like hide, duck in the pod, right? So giving him a lot to do in this episode was really fun.
If we're gonna be critical, this is where my criticism comes in with him.
Oh.
The jumping and the flips felt kind of odd. I feel like they're just kind of out of nowhere, and then people catching him. I feel like don't drop him. Like I'm afraid to he's like they're switching arms with them. I'm like, I'm carrying a baby. I'm going to be very.
It's an $8 million puppet. Be careful. Yeah.
That just kind of takes me out of it a little bit because it's kind of a little goofy. My kids love it. Obviously, they're like, oh, look at him go. And yes, it does definitely have growth for Grogu. That's a hard to say. Growth for Grogu. But I'm glad this is he's kind of babbling. He's using the Force. He's driving the N1 starfighter, and obviously R5's helping him. So that was cool to see that. Like that, obviously he told him how to navigate the stars. He said go see Bo-Katan, and he was able to do that. It's kind of like setup, right? It was foreshadowing. So. It all worked for me. But I think it's interesting to see him do that so quickly.
But it's not. I know you know this, but in the Book of Boba Fett, we see that a lot. He trains with Luke. Luke is showing him how to do that. He's jumping across those little rocks and across the water.
Right.
He's very and Ahsoka says. And Ahsoka and Luke are talking, which is still the greatest sentence a Star Wars fan could ever say.
Amazing.
Yeah, so good. And Luke says, it's not that I'm teaching him so much as he's remembering. So Grogu already knew how to do that stuff, but you spend a lot of time hiding who you are and your abilities because you're afraid you're going to be murdered. So now he's completely relaxed. When he uses the Force, as we see when he Force pushes that Alamite, which is such a great little sequence, which the trailer gave away. Yet another reason never to watch trailers. Thank you very much, universe. That he doesn't get tired, he doesn't get exhausted. He put a Rancor to sleep and he was fine. So
he had to take a nap. He toppled over and had to take a nap.
Eventually, but it was cool. It was not compared to season 1 of Mando. It's not even close.
That's true.
So that, and it's just the effects, because they actually, and if you watch the making of on the Book of Boba Fett, which was wonderful, they show the special effects guys having Grogu on the stick and twirling him around, and it's probably hard. I don't know how else you would do it, but I know what you're saying, Cory.
Yeah, I know he can do it. I'm not saying I doubt he can do it. I think it just takes me out of it a little bit when he does do it, because it's like, oh, okay, he's jumping.
I do feel like they're trying just a smidge too hard to be like, look, see, like he can do stuff. I think if they had just taken away maybe one of the moments like that in this episode, just to kind of like temper it a little bit.
He's doing a flip. Like a little jump. Okay, fine, but like this is a full frontal flip.
He's just showing off at that point.
He's showing off.
Right.
Yeah.
He's flexing. Check me out, Pelly. Now we're coming from different places. I like that. They work great for me, but I'm sure a lot of people feel a little mixed on it too. I think one of my favorite parts of this, and it's just a really quick little moment that I really kind of gleamed onto or jumped onto on the second viewing, was that R5, as they're walking away, watches him on the monitor. Like he cares. Like there's some empathy. And he wants to watch them. It's just a brief little thing, but I think it's really kind of lovely. He gives R5 more than just
Din only leaves the ship because Grogu's like, well, is he gonna be okay? And Din's like, okay, like I'll go check on him.
And this is the guy who hated droids.
Yeah.
Obviously, his change there happened with IG-11. So Bo-Katan and Grogu walk together. We talked about briefly, and we can certainly talk more about how she wields the Darksaber. It's extraordinarily graceful. There's even a sequence when the Darksaber is away from her and she uses her grappling hook thingy. That's the technical term, friends. And she shoots it at the Darksaber and yanks it towards her. And how could you not think of a Jedi with the lightsaber being, and the way she's so, as you said, Jen, she's so graceful with it and eloquent, and she's fought with it before. She even goes underneath the droid when it goes inside the spider, coming out of that little thing, and cuts underneath like Anakin Skywalker did repeatedly in the Clone Wars. It's absolutely gorgeous. But here's some of the things she said. I wrote them down. This was once a beautiful civilization. My family ruled it all. Now it's a tomb. And then there's a lot of back and forth about, I don't know what they told you about us, but the Jedi and the Mandalorian used to get along quite well. We fought side by side. We've never actually seen evidence of this. We've seen in the Clone Wars. I guess in the Siege of Mandalore and stuff with Clone Wars, there was definitely some tension there with some factions. But is that it, or is there more to it? I mean, I remember Dave Filoni years ago at a celebration, I think it was back in 2015, hinting to the fact that there was another major battle besides what we've seen in the film. So I wonder if it's that, or maybe there's just an untapped resource here.
I can't. It could be a little bit of both. I mean, to me, it was very evocative of, like I said earlier, like a lot of her lines are just, they have a depth if you know the rest of canon, right? And but on the surface, it still is meaningful in terms of catching us up on. It's good exposition, I think. So either
way, they want us to know there's tension. There was at some point tension. They're very concerned that we know that.
Right. So I think that larger history is going to come into play in a bigger way at some point, either later this season or in another one. But it's. Yeah, and I think because she's saying that to Grogu because he is like Tari Vizsla, like another intersection of of Mandalore and the Jedi, and so I that had to, in terms of Grogu's character arc coming into his own as a Mandalorian and sort of not forgetting that he's a Jedi, has Jedi training, came from the Jedi Order. I think that's going to have to come into it in some way. So yeah, this might be teasing more lore that we get later on.
Right. Favreau is, we're all kittens and he's got the yarn.
Yeah, I definitely agree with all that. I think they're definitely teasing things that could happen or could not happen. I think that there's definitely, like in Star Wars, it's almost like, well, if we don't see it now, we'll see it in a comic book series or a book series or something like that. So I feel like there's always that possibility of it playing out elsewhere.
So I don't know. There's really not a ton more to say. The fight scene was great, but I really want to jump to the very end unless either of you want to bring up something else.
Well, you brought up the fight scene, and I was thinking about the Darksaber a little bit with her using it. Like, have you ever had a friend? I mean, growing up, I guess I had friends that would have a lightsaber, and they're wheeling around and pulling around like, you want to use it so bad. Like, there's just like this urge of like, oh, just let me try it. Just let me hold it. And like, whenever you pick up a lightsaber, you're making that sound. You gotta feel her tension. Like, I want to use this thing so bad. Finally, she gets a chance to do this. And just wails on this thing, this creature or whatever. So I felt that moment for her, and she was as graceful with what you said. So I think that's what I felt when I saw that. It was kind of a cool moment for her, I think, and definitely getting a chance to finally wield that. Well, I guess in this situation,
I think it's a nice hero moment too. I think it's important to remind the audience that, like she even says to Grogu, when we become Grogu in that moment, did you think your dad was the only Mandalorian?
Right.
Like, I'm pretty tough myself, little buddy.
Yeah.
The snarl that Grogu has towards her when she sort of like questions his bravery is that actually probably was my favorite Grogu moment in the whole episode. It's so good.
Pretty
and
good.
Katie Sackhoff, I mean, everyone's good with Grogu, but Katie Sackhoff in this episode, her acting against Grogu is, I think, was just extra fun.
Yes.
It reminded me of Mark Hamill with Yoda.
Yeah.
Yeah.
She's like the cool, edgy aunt figure.
Yeah.
I feel like that's
Yes.
that's the rapport that they had.
Yeah, let's go out and get a tattoo or something like that.
Doesn't
Yeah.
she even say, "What are you looking at"?
Yeah.
Isn't there like a Joe Pesci thing there at the end?
Yeah.
All right, let's talk about the end. I think it will be fun to just sort of talk about how we noticed it. So I watched this. I was lucky I got to watch it about a week before it came out. And the entire time I'm like walking around mentally holding my lips shut because I'm just afraid I'm going to blurt out the word mythosaur. Because when it happened, there's like some wonderful allusions to it with like, oh, I'm going to give you the full tour. Here's this plaque. The mines were once a mythosaur lair. From these legends, the skull was adopted and became a symbol of our planet. And you're like, okay, that's why Boba Fett's got that thing and blah, blah, blah. And here we go. And we've known that, but it's nice to hear it actually. It's almost spelled out for you. There's even text on the wall, which I haven't freeze framed to look at, but I'm sure that there's the prop people did some cool stuff with it. But when it happened, I said out loud like 3 times in a row to Mason, they did that. I can't believe they did that. They actually did it. And I'll just say more of my reactions because I don't want to hear from the both of you first. But Jen, what did you think?
I was honestly very surprised. And again, I think it goes with the whole idea that this episode really is giving us things that we thought we were going to have to wait all season for. And I think there was a lot of speculation of, when they go to Mandalore, are they going to find a mythosaur? Wouldn't that be cool? And I think just boom, we're 2 episodes into the season and we see one, I think is amazing. And I think as we were sort of talking about earlier, tangentially, Bo-Katan's character arc in this episode, she goes from being extremely jaded and disillusioned to sort of rediscovering the wonder of her childhood. Like that, like she sort of talks about her having to recite the creed as being like very performative and sort of phony almost.
Don't want to embarrass my dad.
Right. Yeah. And it's like, it was just like, she sort of resents the idea that she was in the royal family and had to kind of perform for their subjects and everything. And there's just, she has a lot of bitterness and cynicism. And we even saw that at the end of last episode where she talked about, well, why don't you just take the Darksaber and wave it around? Like she's very flip about it and kind of like really trying to undercut the sort of majesty of Mandalore at every turn. And to me, this moment where she sees, and I was watching with the captions and it says Bo-Katan gasps when she sees it. And so for me, that was almost like a Han Solo believing in the Force kind of moment where it's like, she's like, it is real. This is not just hooey. It's like, this is the like, I was told all these stories and I thought they were fairy tales. And now like I can see with my own eyes that it was real. And I thought that was very, very powerful.
I love that. And I love the Han Solo. That's pretty apt because they're both like our favorite jaded Star Warsians.
Yeah, I had 2 thoughts on that. As far as the mythosaur like reveal, I was given the advice when story writing, when you're telling a story, I guess, give people what they want or something better. And I think that goes with good story writing. And they gave you something we wanted and something better, like the depths of Mandalore and kind of the history behind it, but also the mythosaur was there. Oh, it's real. We're all kind of going, oh, it's real. Even as outside the context of Star Wars, as fans, we're going, oh, hey, this they're actually doing it, like you said, Dan. This is real. And I actually also wrote down the faith in the Force, and then I wrote down it's true, all of it, the Han Solo quote.
Yep.
Because I felt that same thing too. It's like, it's definitely a revelation. Like you've been told all these stories and all of a sudden you've lived it and you're like, yeah, no, it's totally true. Like all they're saying is it's all true. And then you got to convince everybody else. There's someone who's go, come with us, come see the mythosaur. I'll show you. It's just like
he's not going to fit on the N1.
I don't
he wants
think so.
to bring back proof that he's been in the waters, but it's going to take more. Maybe it'll be like a
How
home
would you
video.
bring back proof, I guess.
He's going to sit on it, and they're going to do like a reel. And he's going to sit on it for Bo-Katan's Instagram account. That will go viral. Yeah,
that would definitely go viral.
Where do you think we go from here with the mythosaur?
So I think there's
a sort of go ahead.
No, what do you think? I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, I was just gonna say I'm gonna throw a couple options out there. Is it going to just sort of disappear into the horizon and we don't see it again? And it's more like a Loch Ness monster situation where like she'll try to tell other people, and they'll be like, "Nah,
That's a stick." Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
Or is this going to become that mythosaur going to become a bigger part of the story of the season? Right? Like, is this going to be a Boba Fett Rancor situation where Bo-Katan's riding it like a mount at the end or something? I feel like it could go in a lot of different directions.
What I know is that in the first episode, called The Mandalorian, Queel says, your people tamed the mythosaur, right? So that comes to my mind. But it also comes to my mind the way that they talk about the mythosaur. It's the, not a. So maybe there's only one. And if there is only one and this is the one, is it in fact something that if it appears to you that means something? Like, it's not like Excalibur, but it's the same kind of a concept. A couple interesting things. Water's such a huge thing in all great stories. And I'm sure you caught a lot of that too, Jen. Especially with what you do in your day job, I would say. But when he goes into he makes this big ceremony where he takes off his weapons, but he keeps his armor on and he keeps his helmet on. So at first you're like, well, why? You're gonna drown, dude. But why would he take it off if he's going back in there so he can never take it off again? And you got to suspend your disbelief. The verisimilitude is very rich, and I'm totally good with that. But as soon as he goes in, he sinks. She dives in without hesitation because she's not a conniving backstabber. Thank you very much. And she's races in there. There's one part where she turns off her light, just one quick part, and then it turns it on again. She doesn't need to at first because she can see him, and then she turns it back on again. So
she turns it off to see him though, because he has his light on too.
Yeah, to avoid being blind, just like when you're driving at night, kind of a thing, right? Yeah. Exactly. But then when she sees it, which it couldn't be more perfect, because he could tell her and she would want to believe him, but she wouldn't believe him.
Right.
That's what I would assume. But as soon as they race out of there, he's coughing and gagging. If it's scuba, when you get out of the water, you take out the regulator. He keeps it on because otherwise he's going to have to go through that again. She doesn't remove her helmet. She takes her helmet off all the time. She doesn't whip it off to take a breath and look at that camera and be like, oh. Now, that could very well be undone in the third chapter of season 3. She could do it in the first 5 seconds. She probably will. But in this moment, her instinct is to keep it on. Now, I don't believe, and I want to hear what you both think. I have a hard time believing, because both Dan and Bo, whether they realize it or not, have been looking in the mirror a lot. And, glass is reflective, right? So maybe this planet is reflecting what they really need to see about themselves. That her idea that this is mythical and magical, and it's just kids, you don't know, come on, don't be silly, it's kid stories. She's going to fall from that. And maybe he's going to start to see, well, it'll probably reinforce what he thinks, but he also very much respects Bo-Katan and the other Mandalorians he's met. I don't know. I would be disappointed if they both didn't kind of meet somewhere in the middle, because if that isn't the case, then he's gone through a lot for no reason at all.
Right.
But because it's only the second episode of the third season, I'm babbling and saying a lot of words here, so I apologize. I don't know. I think there's a lot of great stuff in this little Mandalorian stew.
Mandalorian stew. Jen, to your question about what happens next, and Dan, to your point too, is I think that's not necessarily this way or that way. It's going to be a new way. I'd hope that's my fan space, right? That's my head space. Like, I'd like to see something like everybody lives peacefully, the end, type thing. And but obviously, it's going to take some context to gather the troops and convince folks and figure it out and what's going to happen next. And do we go back to the planet and live here, or we do live somewhere else? Do we keep spread out? Do we go find more people? Do we bring, just what is the deal? What's the logistics here? And then the overall fact of just convincing people, just going back and say, hey, we have a new thought. We have a new experience that we can share with others. So it's definitely interesting. Brings a lot of interesting points. And then you brought up the taking the helmet off thing. I was thinking okay, so Din Djarin got pulled under, and we definitely see Bo-Katan, her reaction, the bubbles in the face, and her seeing it, but did Jaren see it? So is it going to be reversed? Like, no, I saw it in there. I'm just, we'll right away after the next
That's
episode,
fun.
but like,
That's an
interesting concept too,
Yeah.
So we'll see. I'm excited to see the next episode for sure.
I really like this idea of them meeting in the middle and sort of creating a new way forward for Mandalore.
Mm-hmm.
And because I could go back to the idea of reflection, I think they will see in each other what they need to see for themselves.
Yes.
Right. So they're gonna sort of, take a little bit from it, like, and then meet in the middle, as Dan's saying. And I think it's gonna be really great to watch. It's
gonna be a lot of fun. It's like in Harry Potter with the Mirror of Erised, right? Desire spelled backwards. But this isn't what necessarily what you most desire, it's maybe what you most need to hear.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of wonderful truth in that, and I love that all the little things that they've set up for us in the first 2 episodes. It doesn't seem like that's the path we're going down, and I'm very much someone who likes to be surprised. I don't want a predictable story. I want to try new things with this wonderful canvas that is the Star Wars universe, and I feel like we've got some amazing people in line that are really setting that up for us.
Yep.
So as we wrap up, we need to give a letter grade for the episode and any final thoughts that we have. Jen, let's start with you.
So I'm going to give this an A. I loved this episode. I think I probably would have been more an A- for the last week's episode. It had restored a feeling of like, it's great to be back in this world and with these characters. But this to me really was a juicy bite into the lore and the myth of Mandalorians in a way that was really satisfying, and the character arcs and the pairings of these characters with each other. I loved all of it. So A is definitely my big thing. And like honestly, the show most of the time is in the A- A range. Like I don't know if I really dip further down for the Mandalorian in general. But I think in terms of final thoughts, it's really interesting to think about Mandalorian culture and the way in which they're negotiating it right now. So there's, and I can't help it. I'm going to get academic. I brought a quote. So there's a post-colonial theorist named Homi Bhabha. He wrote The Location of Culture. And in it, he says, it is in the emergence of the interstices, the overlap and displacement of domains of difference, that the intersubjective and collective experiences of nationness, community interest, or cultural value are negotiated. And I feel like that's exactly what's happening in this episode.
Good. That's why we have you on the show. Plus, you're pretty fun. That's great. No, that's exactly right. I love that.
So it's like they're coming together with different, because of the diaspora, right? They're coming together with different versions of what it means to be a Mandalorian, and through their interactions, they're arriving at a new, like, to borrow what Cory said, a new way. This is the new way.
This is the new way. Interesting. Yeah, overall for me, like you said, Dan, in the beginning, like we got to kind of the idea of the whole series or the whole season this season. He's in Mandalore, he's doing his thing. He's been back to the waters. Already episode 2. I didn't expect that. So I'm so glad we have so much more to uncover and explore. And like you said, there's a path I want to go down, but I also want something even better, right? I want this great path to go down and explore these great characters, but I want something even give me something even better. They've always have on the show. They won't disappoint, I think. Looking forward to some really great stories. I give this a solid A. I think back to last week's, and I gave A+ last week, and I was like, "Oh man, should I lower that grade?" I feel like this episode was better than last week's, so I don't know. I guess I have to rethink about my grading scale, but it doesn't matter. Like you said, Jen, it's like they're all A's, so my curve is really pretty wide. So
just different flavors of A.
That's right.
Yeah, like Mason says on the Bad Batch episodes, it's like an A and 3/9 of it all this. I'm gonna give this one A-. It's wonderful. I actually liked the last week's episode a little bit better. The only thing keeping this from being a solid A for me is there were a few times, and I've never felt this in the entire series ever, because I think The Mandalorian is almost perfect. But there are a few times with some of the line delivery, Din Djarin felt flat to me. Like, I don't know. There was something that was missing from the delivery. And what I've told myself is that maybe he's kind of bereft and speechless because of where he is. And while he's Mandalorian through and through, he's never been to Mandalore. So what makes you who you are? Is it where you're from? Is it how you're raised? Is it how you dress? Is it how you think? Is it how do you identify yourself? So I would like to think that he's kind of out of it. And that's why he was felt a little bit understated. I love the stuff with Grogu and Bo-Katan. I love and both scratched my head that it wasn't going the direction I wanted, but I also really like that. And I think the ending is just a Star Wars fan's dream. Uh-huh. And the effects, while quick and brief, were spectacular. So I'm going to give this one a nice A-.
Listening to Coffee with Kenobi, you are, with Dan Z, the podcast you're looking for. This is...
Now, the two of you, A+. All the way.
Oh, thank you.
Jen, it's so nice to have you back on the show. I'm really glad that this was able to work out. Please let everybody know where they can find your great work and your reviews. It's not only Star Wars, but a lot of great pop culture goodness.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, there's a lot going on right now. So you can find my writing at thelongtake.substack.com. So a Substack, if you're not familiar, is a hybrid blog newsletter. So you can sign up and subscribe for free and get all of my reviews as they're coming out into your inbox. And yeah, right now I'm covering The Last of Us, The Mandalorian, and Bad Batch. Unfortunately, is the casualty of this because the Oscars are this Sunday, and I've really kind of amped up my Oscars coverage this week. And so Bad Batch I'll have to do a catch-up review, I think, after this weekend. So yeah, and actually I just did a soft launch of what I think is going to become a podcast version of the Long Take, and covering Oscars, doing Oscars predictions. So if you have an Oscars pool, you're going to go to an Oscars party this weekend, try to check out our predictions of who we think will win and who should win in each category, and it's been really fun. You can find me on social media at Sopchockchai, Sopchockchai on Instagram, and Qui-Gon Jen on Hive.
So good. Cory, what about you, buddy?
Yeah, if you've got thoughts around what you think that crab creature was, let me know on Twitter at Cory Clubb, or if you have a longer version of like the mythos behind the crab creature and you want to tell me all about its history, feel free to email me at coryc@coffeewithkenobi.com.
I know I was going to introduce you, and the purveyor of the club sandwich.
That was a good one.
That was pretty good. Well, thank you so much, everybody. Please get your top 5 together for not only this, but for the latest Bad Batch episode, which is a monster episode as well. Get your top 5 lists ready, and I will share them on CWK Live, which, of course, is next Tuesday night, 7 o'clock p.m. Central Standard Time. Thank you so much for joining us, everybody. This is the podcast you're looking for.
This podcast is not endorsed by the Walt Disney Company or Lucasfilm Limited. It is intended for entertainment and informational purposes only. The official Star Wars website can be found at www.starwars.com. Star Wars, all names, sounds, and any other Star Wars-related items are registered trademarks and or copyrights of Disney and their respective trademark and copyright holders. All original content of this podcast is the intellectual property of Coffee with Kenobi unless otherwise indicated.
This is the podcast you're looking for.